All right, I'm going to get us going. So everybody get camera ready here, and I will let everyone in. Good morning and or good afternoon to everyone who just joined, depending on where in the world you're dialing in from. This morning, we're going to have a discussion about the latest from the special session in Texas, from the perspective of HRC, our partners, as well as our PTEC members and parents of transgender young people on the ground in Texas. For that, I will kick it off to the Human Rights Campaign's Texas State Director, Rebecca Marquez. Rebecca.
Thank you, Wyatt. Earlier this year, we finished the most extreme legislative session in Texas. More anti-LGBTQ bills were filed than any previous session. Anti-equality lawmakers in Texas have made it perfectly clear that they are not done with their attacks yet. We are now in our second special session. This is also the second time Governor Abbott has added an anti-trans sports ban to the agenda. Sports are a crucial element of childhood development, and every child should have an opportunity to participate. Senate Bill 2 would exclude trans kids from the ability to play with their appropriate peers. It has been passed by the Senate and is now in the House. Earlier this week, the Texas House Public Education Committee gave yet another hearing to this anti-trans bill. As you'll hear from other speakers on the call, whether or not ultimately this bill passes, the cruel discourse that Texas kids and families have been subjected to for the majority portion of this year has taken its toll. Some lawmakers think they can play chicken with anti-trans bills. The implication being that as long as they don't pass, no one gets hurt, or that there is some acceptable level of discrimination that is okay to pass. But families of trans kids tell a different story. Anxiety, depression, even self-harm by transgender youth because of the constant question mark of whether an anti-trans bill will pass this time. Filing and giving hearings to bills targeting transgender children is not a game. It is already causing harm. Families are sitting in anxiety and fear, and trans young people already feel the impacts. This special session is doing active harm to them by continuing to play this game.
Thank you so much, Rebecca. Next, we will hear from Ricardo Martinez, the CEO of Equality Texas. Ricardo.
Thanks, Wyatt. Thank you, Rebecca. My name is Ricardo, and I'm the Chief Executive Officer for Equality Texas. We have over 75,000 members across the state, and these members live across places like Tyler and McAllen and El Paso and Houston, Corpus Christi, Amarillo, and they all have something in common. They are living through the worst year for LGBTQ state legislative attacks on their personhood. There have been, up to this point, in total, over 60 anti-LGBTQ bills filed here in Texas. More than half of these bills target trans people because anti-LGBTQ politicians have poll tested that fear-mongering about the lives of trans people is politically advantageous for re-election. And that is really utterly cruel and despicable. These bills will cause irreparable harm for trans kids and adults alike. People will survive these attacks, but survival at this point really is simply not enough. We have these sessions and we hold the line time and time again, and people celebrate because bills don't pass, but they don't worry about the wreckage and the destruction left behind, or about the impact that these bills have on our communities. And our community deserves much better representation that we have had this year. 60 plus bills that have this has never happened in the United States, not in Texas, not in Tennessee, not in Arkansas, not in Florida, never, nowhere before in the United States. And it's happening right now in Texas. The ferocity of this attack, targeting transgender children, LGBT people, is a national emergency. The public debate around bills like SB 2 make everyday life for LGBTQ people significantly more difficult, and the emotional trauma will take years to undo. The fear mongering about the lives of trans and LGBT people, we know, fuels bias and discrimination, and the political climate has only increased these risks. Since the beginning of session, our organization has seen a marked increase in the bullying and violence against transgender youth and adults. And I just wanted to share a few examples of what we're experiencing right now in real time without SB 2 passing. In March, a teacher from LaPorte ISD called Equality Texas, requesting resources to help trans and non-binary students in her community. The teacher explained that the students were targets of pervasive bullying and threats and intimidation for just being their authentic selves. In April, we received a voicemail and a call from a teacher crying, desperate for help because she has seen the worst bullying she had seen in over 16 years of teaching. And the targets, trans youth. In May, we received an email from a mom who was told by her lesbian daughter that bullies had threatened to shoot up all the LGBTQs at school. In May, according to Trans Lifeline, an organization offering emotional support for trans folks in crisis, saw an almost 72% increase in calls in Texas during the month of May compared to last year, which coincided directly with the debates of a similar bill like SB 2, SB 29. And in May, a recent, well, not in May, but a recent survey commissioned by the Trevor Project showed that LGBT young people reported that 94% of them believe that recent politics negatively impacted their mental health. And in August, and I know that these are a lot of examples, but this is the reality in Texas, and I don't want people to escape it. In August, a man walked up to a trans woman and just punched her at Davenport Lounge in Clear Lake, and then fought with a security guard before fleeing. In August, a woman physically assaulted a trans woman at a convenience store in Houston, and the attack was preceded by transphobic, xenophobic, and racist slurs. This debate is causing irreparable harm. This debate is causing people to question their safety, to create plans before they leave the house to ensure that they can return to their homes later on at night. Parents are telling us about anxiety, depression, extreme weight loss in their kids, and some, like Rebecca, self-harming. We really need to focus on solutions. We need statewide and federal non-discrimination protections to keep our folks safe. And I hope we can do that soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ricardo. Next, we'll move to Emmitt Shell, the Executive Director of the Transgender Education Network. Emmitt.
Thank you so much, Wyatt. My name is Emmitt Shell. My pronouns are he, him, his, and I'm currently the Executive Director for Transgender Education Network, or TENT. We're the largest trans-led, trans-focused policy, advocacy, and education organization here in the great state of Texas. I think I would be really remiss to not start this off by talking about the kids that have been on the front lines of this fight. It's not about just this session here in this state. We are literally watching a generation of children grow up having to come to the state capitol not to learn about the leadership, not to learn about people who were placed in positions and trusted with power to lead, to represent all Texans, but instead they come to the state capitol with fear, frustration, and an internal understanding that there's adults in those hallowed halls that literally are bullying them. They're bullying them simply for the sense of wanting to use them as political pawns. And these are children. regardless transgender or cisgender children. These are kids. I don't believe that any child being irreparably hurt by the damage that we know that bullying causes. There's no lack of information that we have that we know how deeply effective that and traumatizing that bullying is. And then you couple that right with state legislators that are intentionally hurting these kids at this point, because there's just no plausible deniability at this point that our state leadership does not know the harm that it's causing. We're in the state of Texas, which for 6 consecutive years held the title as the most deaths by murder in this country. And it's no coincidence. At the end of the day, when you have people that continue to fuel rhetoric, that continue to deal in falsehoods, characterizing or mischaracterizing, I should say, a group of individuals, of course, this is what it causes. It's no question to me when I'm talking to parents of trans kids, transgender young people who are dealing not just with the hardship of what it is to be trans in a world that largely already is not made for us, but then on top of it to be zeroed in. It is very much akin to me, of what it is to have that strong, like sort of like bully in the class, and really visualizing, right, a small kid being bullied. This is what is happening here. Another thing that I want to really make sure people understand is we have the second largest population of trans people in this nation. And so instead of our leadership recognizing that and trying to find solutions and trying to figure out how do we make sure that we're leading the state with this in mind, of everyone in mind, of how do we become a better state as a whole. Because as we know, the more people in a state that can be strong and can be able to have opportunities and success and move forward, the stronger the state is. It's a very common sense, I think, kind of train of thought. However, we see a state that has the second largest population, again, have state leadership just continue to attack the most vulnerable within our community. And the last thing is, on a personal note, right? I've been unfortunately in the trenches, so to speak, since I had to plead with legislators about my ability to be able to use public accommodations, to try to convince them that I'm not looking to be in a bathroom to harm people. And, at the same time, hear rhetoric that people like me in my community were these massive threats to public safety. And then in the session after that, we heard about how people like me and my community were looking to just destroy a business down to its core, and we had to save that business. And the state of Texas would be in dire straits if we did not. And now in this session, here we are, where we've stooped to a low that I can't even really put into words, where we have kids crying, really wanting to literally, and thank you so much, Frank and Rachel, for being here, but literally saying they want to disappear. What does that mean when we couple that with the statistics that we know are there? And so, we're hoping that the state legislature is going to recognize that this is not a fight that needs to be had, not in Texas and not anywhere. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Emmitt. And speaking of Frank and Rachel Gonzalez, I'd like to introduce them now. They're the parents of a transgender young person in Texas. They're also members of the Human Rights Campaign's Parents for Transgender Equality Council, otherwise known as PTEC. So without further ado, I'll kick it off to Frank and Rachel.
My name is Frank Gonzalez. I use he, him pronouns.
My name is Rachel Gonzalez. I use she, her pronouns. We are the parents of 3 beautiful children, and we're proud to serve on the Human Rights Campaign Parents for Transgender Equality Council.
When I was younger, I loved playing baseball and could not get enough of it. Summer ball was not enough, so I talked to my parents and they let me play winter ball. My family and I moved to a rural town where I soon realized that I was one of the only kids of color in the whole area, which consisted of 4 tiny towns. My love of sports helped me navigate some difficult spaces. It taught me the value of working as a team, instilled great work ethics, and kept me healthy. Most importantly, I had lots of fun playing sports. The lifelong friendships I made during that time are invaluable to me. Unfortunately, many members of the Texas legislature have wasted much of this year actively working to prevent children in Texas from having the same experience and benefits of playing sports. My family, including my 3 young children, are well-seasoned advocates. We've driven thousands of miles and worked hundreds of hours talking to our legislators over the last 5 years, urging them to stop their calculated attack on transgender youth, however it's currently being branded. We have real issues that need to be addressed in this state. We do not need to be wasting another dime of taxpayer dollars or legislature time on these politically orchestrated non-issues. But my family learned very quickly that it has never been a matter of educating legislators on real issues and what it really means to raise a transgender child in Texas. It was never about bathrooms. It's definitely not about sports now. They know exactly what they're doing. They're leveraging my child and children across the state to promote a political agenda and nothing more. We're exhausted and we're angry. Our community of friends, family, teachers, administrators, and coaches know and love our family, including our transgender daughter, exactly as she is. She's cherished, valued, and seen by people in her life that matter. It is astounding to me that legislators in this state insist on inviting the general public into our private life. They continue to force the transgender community, one of the most vulnerable and marginalized populations in this state, to defend their mere existence.
Our daughter Libby is, she is the prime example of an extrovert. So sports to her is all about the friendships. It's all about the community. And she loves it. When you ask her why she likes playing sports, she'll tell you that it's because she gets to make new friends and she gets to spend time with the friends that she has. We are so tired. We are so angry that our legislature insists on leveraging our daughter, leveraging innocent children across the state for political gain. They are not their pawns. We should not have to defend our daughter. Her existence is not up for debate. And it's a really impossible conversation as a parent to turn around and listen to my daughter say that she knows she matters. We have instilled that in her. She lives in a community that supports her and loves her. Yet, how do I tell her when she asked me that the leaders of this country do care about her, when in fact, all they're doing is tokenizing her, using them for their own political pawns, and trying to convince her, in her own words, trying to convince her that she doesn't matter. As a parent, we are in an impossible situation. We are so tired. We are so sick of going to Austin over and over to beg legislators to care about kids' lives, but we don't have any other option. We've been doing this for 5 years, and at this rate, who knows how much longer if these legislators don't step up and put a stop to this, stop using our children.
My wife and I continue to show up to say that we will not stand for it. My daughter's life is not for your debate. We want every transgender youth across this state to know that we have your back and will always fight for your rights. We're counting on our legislators, the Texas LGBTQ caucus, Republicans and Democrats alike. We need you to prioritize the safety of all children in the state, including our daughter.
Thank you.
Thank you both so much. Next, we'll hear from Annlise Catherine, the parent of a transgender young person in Texas. Annlise.
My name is Annlise. I use she, her pronouns. I'm from San Antonio, Texas. I'm here today on behalf of my 9-year-old transgender child, a child that did not ask to be in the center of political attacks and partisan extremism from our Texas legislature. We've been enduring these attacks on our family for months. The trauma is palpable and chronic. Despite the emotional and physical toll this experience has caused, I am like any other mother of any other child. I pack their lunches, soothe their scraped knees, show up to PTA meetings, help them with homework. The only difference between my transgender kid and any other kid in Texas is that Greg Abbott and the Texas legislature are openly, brazenly, and deliberately attacking them for their. The bizarre obsession with transgender children and their bodies is disgusting and unconscionable. I can guarantee that any Texas mother of any Texas child would be sitting exactly where I am today if politicians couldn't stop asking them about their child's genitals. I need Texans to know that the damage is already done. This chronic humiliation and unrelentless assault by the Texas legislature has caused irreparable harm to families. Families like mine who just want to be left in peace and maintain our individual liberties afforded to every other Texan. Families that represent 70% of Texas voters who do not agree with anti-LGBTQ legislation. The larger question here is why? Why are more than 60 bills and amendments being targeted towards transgender people, including children in Texas? If this is about school sports, then why are you trying to take away my child's health care? If this is about empowering women and girls, why are you attacking healthcare providers? If this is about competition, why are you introducing legislation to make me a child abuser? I can be assured this is not about safety because some legislators are willing to let my kid die of COVID before allowing even the most bare minimum of safety standards in their school. I know exactly what this is about. My kid doesn't vote, so Greg Abbott does not care about them. As a mother, a military wife, a person of faith, and a dedicated Texan, I can tell you this legislation does not represent our community. We value small government, personal liberty, and protecting children at any cost. I am calling on our leaders to stop this selfish political posturing and focus on what Texans actually need: a functioning healthcare system, a stable electric grid, and COVID-19 response. I am begging Texas politicians to put aside partisan extremism and work together on improving the lives of all Texans. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Annlise. And finally, we will be hearing from Human Rights Campaign's State Legislative Director and Senior Counsel, Katherine Oakley. Kate.
Thanks, Wyatt. And thank you to everybody who's spoken before. I will keep my remarks brief because I think you've heard from the folks who have the most important things to say. And I'll start by reflecting back something that Annlise just said, which is that we do know what this is about. We've saw this year, unfortunately, across the country that this was a record-breaking year for anti-LGBTQ legislation. We had more than 25 anti-LGBTQ bills enacted, including 13 specifically anti-transgender laws across 8 states. We had more than 250 anti-LGBTQ bills introduced across 33 states, including more than 130 specifically anti-transgender bills. That's almost double last year's high, which had been the historic high number of anti-transgender pieces of legislation filed around the country. You know, as Annlise said, there are lots of justifications for these bills being put forward. Some of these bills are prohibitions on trans youth being able to access medically necessary best practice gender affirming care. Some of them are about sports. Some of them are about bathrooms. Some of them are about other things. But what they all have in common is that they are all trying to demonize and attack transgender folks, particularly transgender youth. And unfortunately, that was really the theme that we saw rise to the top this year with the anti-LGBTQ legislation that was introduced. This was really the through line, was trying to ostracize, hurt, demonize, exclude transgender youth. And as all of the speakers already have said, just the introduction of these bills has a very significant harm. Having your own personhood be something that is subject to debate by the people who you have entrusted the ability to govern you, to have your identity up for debate by those people, that is a really, truly frightening thing. And again, I go back to what Annlise said about, we know what this is really about. We know that this is really about anti-transgender discrimination. It doesn't matter what kind of justification is put forward. There is no crisis that is necessitating this intervention around who is allowed to play sports and who's allowed to be on which team. This is trans youth have been allowed to participate in sports consistent with their gender identity around the country for many, many, many years. And these are simply not problems. We just saw the Olympics. You know, transgender athletes have been allowed to compete in the Olympics. There has been no domination of women's sports by transgender women. It's just simply not the case. And this is all about providing a justification to be able to come in and demonize trans youth, which unfortunately is something that Texas has really taken the lead on over the course of the last 6 years in those legislative sessions that have happened since. And so I will just sum all of this up for what we're here today to say that this has been a historic, record-breaking year across the country. Texas itself, as Ricardo mentioned, has been shattering records. And it is critically important that in all of this conversation that we are centering the people who are most impacted, not only by having these bills pass, but by having this debate be something that is happening in public. And that's trans youth. It's trans youth who are feeling this more than anything else. And so thank you to all of my co-panelists here for sharing different perspectives on why this is so horrifying and challenging. And thank you to everyone for your continued resistance to these bills and having them pass. Just because they haven't become law, that is a huge accomplishment in and of itself, which credit for which goes to many people who are on this call. But as we all also know, that is not enough. What we really need is for people to be able to move past this conversation that really only serves to demonize and exclude transgender youth. And with that, Wyatt, I'm going to send it back to you.
Thank you, Kate. And I want to echo what Kate mentioned just a second ago, which is to thank all of our panelists, participants, speakers here today. We'll move now to the question and answer portion. If folks have questions for any of our participants, what I'll ask is that folks hop into the chat. You can message me directly. You can message the entire group to let me know that you have a question, at which point I will call on you and you can ask that question out loud. I'll give folks a minute to pop in, but I also saw that Orion, who I know knows the drill, has already done so. So I will lead off with Orion and let them ask the first question.